The forest had been unusually silent since dawn, the kind of silence that pressed against Lee's ears like a warning. She had learned to read the moods of the ancient forest over the last months, its rustling tempers, its whispering streams, its sudden stillness that usually came before a storm or the arrival of something dangerous. This morning felt different. The air was thick, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath, watching her move through the undergrowth with cautious, measured steps. She tightened her grip on her spear, the wooden shaft smooth from constant use, and listened. Nothing. Not a bird call, not the familiar chattering of monkeys, not even the hum of insects. She had lived long enough in this wilderness to know that when the forest went quiet, something powerful was moving within it. Lee made her way toward the northern edge of the valley where she had left some traps the night before. She was running low on dried meat, and the last few days had offered little success. She pushed aside ferns taller than her shoulders, feeling droplets roll down her skin from the early morning dew. Her senses stayed sharp, scanning the shadows, tracing every sound. Survival here meant more than gathering food, it meant anticipating danger before it arrived. The forest had been generous to her at times, but it was still wild, unpredictable, and brutally honest about what it took to live. She reached the first trap, a simple snare near a fallen log. It was empty, the bait untouched. She sighed and went to the next one. Also empty. By the third and fourth, she began to feel tension coil in her stomach. When prey disappeared, predators usually came. And predators always change the balance of the forest. She crouched, examining the disturbed leaves and faint prints near her fourth trap. Something large had passed through here, large enough to flatten a narrow path between the ferns. The tracks were smooth, long, dragging arcs in the soft earth. Not paw prints. Not claws. A long, wide impression. She felt her throat tighten. A snake. And not just any snake. Only one creature could leave a trail that wide. A giant python. She had heard stories of them from old books before her life had changed, back when she had lived in a world with electricity, cities, and noise. But those books could never compare to the cold truth of seeing evidence of one up close. She rose slowly and followed the trail, each step deliberate, careful not to break twigs or rustle leaves too loudly. If the python was hunting in this area, it was likely still close, and the silence of the forest confirmed it. She moved deeper into the valley, where the air felt cooler and the light dimmer under the towering canopy. The forest here was ancient, untouched by anything but time and nature's persistence. Massive roots twisted across the ground like stone serpents, and vines hung thick as ropes from branches that swayed gently above her. The trail grew clearer, the path more defined. Whatever the python had eaten, or planned to eat, must have been large. She noticed broken branches lifted high on trees, signs of the python's weight as it moved. Her heartbeat quickened. She didn't want to encounter it unprepared. But she also couldn't turn back. If a predator that size made this area its hunting ground, it would change everything: her traps, her shelter, her access to water. She needed to know exactly what she was dealing with. She gripped her spear tighter and whispered a quiet breath of reassurance to herself. She had faced danger before. She had learned to outsmart wolves, evade boars, escape the claws of a desperate jaguar. She could handle this too. She had to. A rustle echoed from up ahead, low and heavy, like something sliding over leaves. Lee froze. Her breath caught shallowly in her chest, and she crouched behind a wide trunk covered in moss. The sound grew louder, deliberate and slow. She peeked around the tree. At first, she saw nothing but shifting shadows. Then the shape came into view, massive, dark, and gliding smoothly across the forest floor like a river of muscle. The python was enormous, easily more than 20 feet long, its scales glistening with the muted green and brown patterns of the forest. Its body was thick as her waist, coiling and uncoiling with effortless control. Its head was triangular, wide, and alive with an ancient, chilling intelligence. Lee swallowed hard, forcing herself not to panic. The snake was moving toward a cluster of low bushes, circling slowly. She followed its gaze and saw another movement, the trembling of a small deer trapped beneath the branches. It must have stumbled into a narrow ditch and gotten stuck. The python had already chosen its prey. She pressed her back against the tree, watching as the giant snake reared its head slightly, tongue flicking, scenting the air. The deer's frantic breathing filled the silence, desperate but too weak to escape. She should leave. That was the logical choice. Pythons did not attack humans unless threatened. If she remained still, she would be safe. But the deer's panicked cries stirred something in her. Survival here had made her hard, but it hadn't stripped away the instincts of compassion she tried so hard to keep. That deer could feed her for days if she claimed it first, but she also knew the python would not tolerate interference once the hunt began. She weighed the risks carefully. If she let the python feed, it would grow stronger and stay in this area longer, threatening her safety. If she acted quickly, she could drive it off, but if she miscalculated, even for a second, the python could overpower her. Her pulse thundered in her ears as she picked up a thick branch and tossed it far behind her. The branch smacked the ground loudly. The python's head snapped around, focusing on the source of the noise. It hesitated only for a moment before redirecting its massive body. The distraction worked. Lee sprung into action. She darted forward, grabbed the deer by its hind legs, and pulled with all her strength. The animal was lighter than she expected, trembling violently as she freed it from the branches. The python hissed, a low, vibrating warning that chilled her to the bone. She hoisted the deer onto her shoulders and sprinted toward higher ground. Behind her, the python surged, its massive body sliding rapidly across the forest floor. She didn't look back. She knew it could move faster than she could. She zigzagged between trees, leapt over roots, and swung around vines. The forest blurred around her in streaks of green and brown. She reached a fallen tree with a hollowed-out trunk and slipped inside, pulling the deer with her. The space was tight, but she pressed against the curved wood, holding her breath. The python arrived seconds later, its coils brushing against the trunk. The force of its body vibrating against the wood made her teeth clench. She stayed perfectly still, barely breathing as the snake searched. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, the python's movement slowed, then faded entirely as it slithered away in frustration. Lee waited until she could no longer hear it before crawling out of the log. Her legs trembled from tension and exertion. The deer's fright had faded into exhausted stillness, but it still breathed. She knew it wouldn't survive long. Its leg was twisted unnaturally. She whispered an apology before ending its suffering quickly and respectfully. She didn't enjoy killing. She simply had no other choice. The trek back to her camp was quiet, the forest slowly returning to its normal rhythm. Birds began to call again. Insects buzzed. The weight of the deer on her shoulders felt heavy, but it also grounded her. She had survived another day in this wild place. But the presence of the giant python changed everything. She would need to move her traps. She would need new strategies. She would need to stay alert, more than ever. That was the price of living here alone. As she reached her camp, the sun filtered through the trees in gentle, golden rays. For a moment, she allowed herself to breathe freely. She had faced the forest's ancient predator and lived. But she knew this was not the end. The python would return, and she would have to be prepared. She stood in the clearing, watching the shadows shift, feeling the weight of her survival settle into her bones. Every day in this ancient forest was a test, and she was determined to pass each one, no matter how dangerous the challenge. The forest was her home now. And she would defend it. And herself, with everything she had.